There was a young boy named MacTulliver. He lived with his mother and father in an old mansion on the edge of a forest. The family was wealthy and they owned a lot of land. However, as the time went by, the family fell on hard times, and the parents were forced to sell their land to some properties developer. The young boy loved playing in the forest, and he didn't want his parents to sell it. When the deal went through, the young boy was furious with his parents, and he went out of his mind. One dark night, he crept into his parents' bedroom and murdered them with a knife. Their bodies were found by the police a few days later. They were hanging from ceiling with their throats slit from ear to ear. On the wall, there was a message written in their blood. It reads, "You shouldn't have sold the land," and it was signed by MacTulliver. The boy was never seen or heard from again. A few years later, the Tulliver boys turned the land into a summer camp. The mansion where the Tulliver family had lived was still standing, but over the years it had become dilapidated and it was now abandoned. The first summer it opened, two of the campers went missing. The camp counselors organized two search parties to go out into the woods and search for them. Eventually, the missing campers were found, but it was an horrifying scene. They were hanging by their necks from branches of a tree, and their throats had been sliced open. There was a wooden board nailed to the tree above them, with a message on it written in blood. It reads, "Stay off my land, no trees passing here," and it was signed by MacTulliver. The next summer, the camp was still open. Around the campfire, the camp counselors told the story of MacTulliver and how he murdered his family. All of the kids were terrified. There was one kid that summer who everyone liked to pick. He was a quite shy kid named Cameron, and the other always made him the butt of their jokes. The camp counselors decided to play a prank on the kids. After telling the story of what happened to all those years ago in the house, they made an announcement. That night, they would take the campers one by one and make them walk through the old mansion. Two of the counselors named Dave and Steve were going to take the campers to the house. Cameron said he was too scared, but they told him he had to go. He was the first one picked. Steve took Cameron with him, and they walked off towards the mansion. Everybody else stayed in the campfire and waited their turn. They waited and waited and waited, but Steve and Cameron never came back. After an hour of waiting, they began to get impatient. Dave decided to take all the other campers with him and check out what was going on. When they arrived at the old mansion, they didn't see Steve or Cameron anywhere. The place was eerily silent. Just then, they heard a noise. Thump! 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 It was coming from upstairs. Dave told the kids he was going up and investigate. He told them to stay behind, but they insisted on going with him. They went upstairs together in a single file. When they reached the second floor, the noise grew louder. Thump! 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 It seemed to be coming from the room at the end of the hallway. That was the bedroom where MacTulliver had murdered his parents. They walked cautiously down the hallway, and when they came to the bedroom door, they could hear another noise. Drip, drip, drip. Dave reached out, turned the knob, and slowly opened the door. When it swung up, they saw what was in the room. Everyone screamed in the night. Steve was hanging by the neck of a rope. His face was purple, his eyes were blacking out of his head, and his tongue was thrust out of his mouth. His lifeless body was swaying back and forth, and his shoes kept hitting the wall. His throat had been cut open, and the blood was dripping down onto the floor. On the wall behind him, scrawled in blood, was a message. It reads, "I'm back," and it was signed by Cain Revillo. A friend of mine is a budding nature photographer. She loves to go out into the wild and take pictures of animals and plants. A few months ago, she decided to spend the whole day taking photos in a remote part of the forest. It meant she would have to camp for the night alone in the woods. She was looking forward to all the awesome photo opportunities she would find with all interesting trees and wildlife in that area. It would make a welcome addition to her portfolio. She was not afraid to be alone during the night because she had camped on her own many times before. She pitched her tent in the middle of a small clearing and spent the day taking photos. By the end of the day, when she settled down to sleep in the tent, she had taken over 400 photographs on her digital camera. The next day, when she was scrolling through the photos on her laptop, she noticed something very strange. What she thought those photos had haunted her ever seen. In fact, she's still recovering from the trauma it caused. Almost all the pictures were normal, except the 4 final pictures in the folder. These 4 pictures were of her, asleep in her tent in the middle of the night. A group of teenagers decided to go camping in the wilderness. There were 6 of them together. 3 boys named William, Vincent, and Mark, and 3 girls named Julie, Celia, and Cynthia. They packed their camping gear into the boot of the car and drove out to the camping site. That evening they set up their tents and rolled their sleeping bags. As night fell, they built a campfire and gathered around it to roast marshmallows, seated in a circle around the crackling flames, and they began to tell ghost stories. Suddenly, they heard a voice screaming from the darkness. At first, they thought it was just one of the boys playing a joke on them. They turned to where Williams was sitting, since he was the most misbehaved on the group, but he was gone. They assumed he must have gotten up to go to the bathroom in the forest, so they resumed their conversation. Just as one of them was about to start another horror story, they heard the voice shout again. They looked around, but they couldn't make anything in the pitch black night. Then one of the boys exclaimed, "Hey, look, Julie's gone!" She had been sitting opposite him just a few moments earlier, but now her seat was empty. The teenagers began to get nervous, especially since William had not turned. Usually, after one of his pranks, he would come back laughing and making fun of them. They tried to dismiss their fears and continued with their horror stories. Suddenly, from the darkness, the voice boomed out again. This time, when they turned around, they noticed that Vincent was missing. At this, they became seriously frightened. Only 3 of them remained seated around the campfire. Anxiously, they peered into the darkness, wondering what was going on. Cecilia was trembling with her fear. "Where do you think they are?" she whispered, her voice shaking. Mark was about to answer when he was interrupted by the deep voice. Mark was taken by surprise and almost fell off the log he was sitting on. When he steadied himself, he realized that only he and Cynthia remained around the campfire. Cecilia has disappeared. Since there were only 2 of them left, they made a solemn promise that would not leave each other. Mark had a sneaking suspicion that the others were hiding in the woods and trying not to laugh as they watched him and Cynthia shaking in their boots. Again, the voice cried out. Cynthia hid her face with her hands. She was too terrified to look. "Mark," she hissed. "Mark, what's going on?" There was no answer. Slowly, she parted her fingers and found herself all alone. She began to panic and burst into tears. She sat on the log as the fire crackled and jumped at the slightest noise coming from the woods. Clutching herself tightly, she began shaking like a leaf. "I can't take it anymore," she yelled out in desperation. "She get it over with." She heard the voice again. After that, she heard nothing more. The next day, when they didn't return home, the parents of the teenagers reported them missing. The police drove out to the compound to investigate. Near the remains of the undistinguished campfire, they found 6 headless corpses. One of the officers approached the bodies to take a closer look when suddenly he heard a voice scream out. He turned just in time to see a madman rushing at him with a bloody knife.